Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmaswarupine avatara varishtaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. O Ramakrishna, the establisher of the eternal religion, the embodiment of all religions, the best of all incarnations, we salute thee. In the last reading class, we left at page 567. We shall continue today from there. We may remember that Sri Ramakrishna's manifestation of this mood of spiritual teacher was being discussed in the last class. The same subject continues today. We will start reading. It is necessary to discuss the subject a little more. There is an event recorded in the Bible exactly similar to this in the life of Jesus, an incarnation of the Divine Lord and the founder of the Christian religion. He was then 12 years of age, Jesus. He, his poor, God-fearing father, Joseph, and Mother Mary started that year on foot with him in the company of the other pilgrims from his native village of Nazareth in the province of Galilee in order to pay a visit to the deity in the famous temple at Jerusalem and offer worship, sacrifice, etc. there. This place of pilgrimage of the Jews was like the pilgrim centers of the Hindus here in India. Here, the devout aspirant felt blessed by directly experiencing the manifestation of Jehovah in the gold casket and worshipped the deity by burning incense on an altar before him and by offering leaves and flowers, fruits and roots, and by sacrificing beasts and birds like sheep, pigeons, etc. The sacrificing of pigeons and other birds in the Hindu places of pilgrimage like Kamakhya and Vindhyavasini is in vogue even today. Worship, offering and sacrifices being over, Joseph and Mary started with their companions towards their village. The author, Swami Gautamananda, he had spent quite some time in Europe visiting all the Christian pilgrimages. That is why he gives comparison of what Jerusalem was at that time. It was almost looking like any of our pilgrimage places in India. So he is continuing the narration. At that time, the condition of the pilgrims coming from various quarters to visit Jerusalem was to a certain extent similar to that of those proceeding on foot to Puri and other places of pilgrimage before railways had been laid. It was similar. The people had to undergo a lot of trouble, but with faith they used to do it. That long, narrow path, beautified here and there by trees, wells, ponds, those places of rest called inns. It is said there was also no lack of charitable guest houses. Those guide priests, the inevitable companions of pilgrims, those grocers' shops where the necessary provisions were available, that dust, those swarms of mosquitoes which rendered a friendly service to the pilgrims by preventing their forgetting their religious thoughts in sleep and idleness. That undertaking of journeys by pilgrims in great numbers so as to be of help to one another against robbers and thieves, and last, that simple faith and dependence on God, all were there. When Jesus' parents found that he was not with them while they were returning. They found the boy missing. When he was not with them, they thought that he was perhaps coming behind the party with some other pilgrim boys. But even after traveling a long distance, when they found Jesus not coming up, they were greatly perturbed. And when a thorough search in the big party revealed that he was not with them, they anxiously turned their steps towards Jerusalem again. They looked for him in various places there, but could not get any information about him. At last, they entered the temple in search of him. Very odd place for a boy of 12 or 14 to be seen inside the temple, and found that the boy Jesus was sitting and discussing the scriptures among the sadhakas, well versed in them, and was charming all by lucid, inspired explanations of the complicated points of dispute, which confounded even the scholars. The great scholar Max Muller has expressed a doubt in his life and sayings of Ramakrishna about the truth of the incident in the Master's life stated above, on the ground of its great similarity with the corresponding incident in the life of Lord Jesus just mentioned. We may know that at the time of, in 1896, this great scholar, Max Muller, he was the greatest scholar about the Sanskrit learning in India, in the West. He was considered the greatest scholar. So, such a person, he was so much impressed after hearing about Sri Ramakrishna's life and teachings. He wrote himself a big article, Life and Sayings of Ramakrishna, in one of the famous magazines of the West. And he became that article was publicized very much. Many really thirsty spiritual people, both in Europe and America, appreciated the life and sayings of Ramakrishna as presented by Max Muller. So at that time, every Indian was feeling proud about the great understanding of Sri Ramakrishna by this great Western scholar. It is that particular book is being referred to here. So he has not even shrunk from passing the uncharitable remark that the English-knowing disciples of Sri Ramakrishna have introduced the story of Jesus' childhood into the life of their master in order to heighten the latter's greatness. So Max Muller, he was a very rational person, a Western scholar. So naturally he had his own comments to make. So he made a comment saying that in Sri Ramakrishna's life, they are telling about the childhood manifestation of his spiritual mood. It is so similar to Jesus Christ, almost about the same age, almost in the spiritual atmosphere, and solving a spiritual dispute. All are so similar. So it is quite possible, Max Muller said, that the English-knowing disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, so they have introduced this into his life. So it is not a real fact, but it is only an interpolation in the life of Sri Ramakrishna by these English-knowing disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. That's what the great professor had remarked. So this author is taking that for consideration and passing his feelings about it. Although the scholar has thus displayed his keen intellect, we are helpless. We Indian scholars, we are helpless and prefer not to dilate upon it further. For we have heard of that event of the Master's childhood from many old people of his birthplace, Kamarpukur, and also from the Master himself on several occasions. Max Muller was such a great person, very sympathetic to India, one of the great advocates of Vedanta in the West. Such a person, when he has passed something adverse, against the life of Sri Ramakrishna falsely. So this author is very much pained, but he doesn't want to antagonize that great scholar for this one remark. Therefore he said, we are helpless. We cannot dilate upon this. We stop here. But he says, truth is, we have heard it directly from the people of Kamarpukur. And from the master himself we have heard that this incident has happened. So how can one deny? So there itself, he doesn't want to go into dispute and displease this great scholar, Professor Max Muller. When studying the master's life, one is confronted with the question, why did he marry? He comes to another point of the extraordinary occurrence in his life of another incident. What is that? The marriage of Sri Ramakrishna. Why did he marry? Why did a person who was never inclined to have any carnal relationship with his wife marry at all? It is of course difficult to find the reason. To the suggestion that his relatives married him against his will, when on reaching youth he became almost mad, owing to his constant thinking of God, we reply, it is silly to entertain such an idea. Some people said, so he has been moved by his own by his own instincts to marry. So he has married. At that time he was mad after God. At that time he would have said that I will not marry. But afterwards somebody must have forced him. And so he had his inclinations deep inside him. He must have married. So by the compulsion of others, so he had yielded to the compulsion. That is the statement of certain people. So this author dismisses that. It is just a silly one. Because from his childhood, no one could get anything done by him against his will. He had a very strong will. Nobody could convince him when he had held on to some certain things as correct, on however a trivial matter. Again, whenever he wanted to do anything, he never failed to accomplish it by some means or other. He would employ any means and would achieve. He was an achiever. Take, for instance, his having for his Bhiksha Mata, who gave Bhiksha during his thread ceremony, a blacksmith woman named Dhani at the time of his investiture with the sacred thread. Social rules and regulations were not observed in the villages with as much laxity as in Calcutta. He was in a very orthodox situation. So no one could act according to his own sweet will in the villages. Everybody had to follow the customs. But Sri Ramakrishna did not. Even as a young boy of 8 or 10, so he did not follow the existing rules of the society. The master's parents also were not a little orthodox, and it was the custom of the family to assign the duty of the Bhiksha Mata, the lady who would give the Bhiksha to the newly young man who is invested with the sacred thread. Bhiksha Mata to a Brahmin lady and all the support superiors of the family of the boy Gadadhar were against his receiving Bhiksha from a blacksmith woman who was not Brahmin. In spite of all this, opposition melted away before Gadadhar's insistence, and Dhani became the Bhiksha Mata. He insisted, if you want me to have the thread ceremony, I should take the Bhiksha from this non-Brahmin woman. If you don't allow me, I have already promised that. So I will be an untruthful person. An untruthful person does not deserve the sacred thread. So cancel the sacred thread itself. That was his argument. So there was great fix, and at last they had to come down. Gadadhar did not compromise. Such strong will he had. This was a matter of no small surprise. Thus it was with all matters. The master's will and words ever prevailed against the wills and desires of others. How can we say that in such an important event in his life, he merely acquiesced in the mere desires and requests of his relatives? So the relatives and friends who prevailed upon him to marry it is a silly argument. Nobody could have prevailed against his will. So he himself must have consented. Then only they could have married him. Then, again, further argument. It might again be said, what is the necessity of admitting that the master had the idea of renouncing everything out of love of God from his very childhood? We can say instead that the master at first had the desire to marry and enjoy worldly pleasures, like people in general. But that no sooner had he attained maturity than there came about a sudden revolutionary change in his mind and a violent storm of detachment from the world and attachment to God raged in his heart, which overturned all the previous plans and desires. In that case, all objections would be removed in a natural way. All objections are removed if it be said that the master's marriage took place before that storm began to rage. So, this is the argument some people said. Earlier he was like anybody else, so he desired to be married. At that time he married. Later on, all the desire to give up everything and attain to the vision of God, it came later. So, let us do like that. Let us assume that this is the fact about his marrying. He married when he was an ordinary person. When he became an extraordinary aspirant after God, then he became mad with God. At that time, he wanted to renounce everything, including his wife and everything. We say that although this explanation is plausible, there are some irrefutable objections against this attitude. Firstly, the master was married at the age of 24. The storm of renunciation was then furiously raging in his heart. And it is quite unlikely that a person like him, who hesitated all his life to give the slightest trouble to anyone for his own sake, should have proceeded thoughtlessly to do an act which he knew full well would be the cause of lifelong suffering for a lady. Secondly, the more we think, the more can we understand that no act in the master's life was done without a purpose. Thirdly, it is quite certain that he married willingly, for he told his nephew Hriday and all the members of the family, when they were in search of a bride, that it had already been divinely settled that he should be married to the daughter of Ramchandra Mukherjee of the village of Gherambati. The reader will either be surprised to hear this or will disbelieve it and say, fancy, speaking of such incredible things, can this statement be accepted in the 20th century? We have to say in reply, whether you believe it or not, it was indeed a fact. There are many still living who will bear it out. Why don't you just investigate? When in their search for a bride, his relatives failed to get one, the master himself said, go and see, such and such a girl of such and such a village has been marked with a straw for the purpose. Therefore, it is clear that the master knew that he would be married. What was more, he knew also the place of marriage and the person to whose daughter he would be married. And he did not raise any objection to that. It was, of course, during his Bhav Samadhi that he had come to know of it. What then is the meaning of the master's marriage? Some reader well versed in the scriptures will perhaps be annoyed and say, "How silly, you are raising a storm in a teacup. First consult some scriptures and other books and then venture to record the events of the lives of great pious souls." Scriptures say that actions accumulated in previous lives that are yet to bear fruit and those that are done after the attainment of the knowledge of Brahman are destroyed. So, though the arguments were there and that Sri Ramakrishna married out of his own will and he himself suggested where he would be married, so there was no question of forcing it upon him. So for knowing full well, he married. And it was not before he had started that he was an ordinary person and he wanted to marry. He was in full swing of spiritual sadhanas, spiritual practices. Even amidst that one, he knew that he would be married to such and such a girl. So it was a sort of a well-known fact in his spiritual vision. So he had known that he was to be married. So now the author goes to give a meaning for his marrying. When God vision of perfect knowledge is attained, so these orthodox people say, no, you see, though he must have been against marriage, but the marriage must take place because of his karma, because he had to reap the fruits of his past actions. So some karma, though he has attained knowledge, and the knowledge can destroy only that which is yet to happen, the incidents that are yet to happen. And whatever has been done and whose impressions are there in the mind, these two will be destroyed through the spiritual knowledge a person gets, which Sri Ramakrishna had got, so that would have destroyed what he had done, so he doesn't have to reap the fruits of that what he has done. And what he will be doing, he will not be doing at all, that also is destroyed. But what is happening now, which is keeping his life going on, this is called the prarabdha karma. The karma that is acting now, it cannot be stopped. So, because he had done something in the past, so that impressions have forced him to marry. So, that subject is being discussed by the author. When God will or perfect knowledge is attained, so only those two are destroyed. The incidents that are yet to happen, the incident that has already happened. But the incident that is happening right now in this lifetime, nobody has control over it. He must undergo the experiences of that. So in that way, Sri Ramakrishna's marriage took place. This is the orthodox view. But the results of the works done in the previous births that are already bearing fruit, that is prarabdha karma, have to be experienced in this life, even when the knowledge of Brahman is achieved. Though he has attained the knowledge of Brahman, which destroys the karma, but only the present karma that is being worked out, it cannot destroy. That is the orthodox view. Suppose there are some arrows. An example is given. In a quiver tied to the back of a fowler, he has taken in hand one arrow in order to shoot. He shot one a little before at a bird on a tree. Just at this moment, there arises sudden compassion in the mind of the fowler, and he resolves that he will no more injure any living being. He throws away the arrow in his hand and also the arrows on his back. But can he withdraw the arrow he has already shot at the bird. The arrows on his back are, as it were, his actions accumulated in the past lives. The arrow in his hand represents the future acts which he is yet to do in his life. But these kinds of acts are destroyed on the acquisition of knowledge. That's what the scriptures say. That's what the orthodox people are explaining. But his prarabdha acts are like the arrow is already discharged. Its result he has to experience. He has no control over it. It will go and eat that bird. Though he has decided he will not injure any bird, this he cannot stop. After this one, he may not injure any bird. But this bird, at whose point is, at direction he has shot the arrow, must be injured. Great souls like Sri Ramakrishna experience the results of their prarabdha actions only while conscious in a body. The experience of these results is inevitable, and they know and understand what kinds of events will happen in their lives according to their prarabdha acts. Therefore, it was not extraordinary for Sri Ramakrishna to mention where and to whom his own marriage would take place. In reply to the above objection, we say that we are really quite unlearned in the scriptures. But so far as we know, we can say that a man of right knowledge has not got to experience even the results of his prarabdha actions. For he has dedicated to God forever the mind which feels pain and pleasure. Where then is the possibility in his mind of experiencing pain or pleasure? But if you say that prarabdha actions are experienced in his body, how is even that possible? If he by his own will keeps a little of the I-ness for some reason or other, as for instance doing good to others, he becomes conscious of his mind and body again, and simultaneously experience the results of prarabdha actions. Therefore, men of right knowledge can experience or abstain from experiencing at will the results of those actions, such as the power they attain. That is why they are called the conquerors of the worlds, the conquerors of death, all-knowing, and so on. So these people who have got the highest knowledge, they cannot be affected even by the prarabdha karma. That is the conclusion of the author. So we shall continue this topic in our next reading class. Till then, we stop here. Niranjanam nityamanantarupam bhaktanukampadhrita vigraham vai Ishavataram parameshamidyam tam Ramakrishnam shirasa namamaha. O Ramakrishna, the taintless one, the eternal one, the one with infinite forms, the one who has assumed form for the sake of devotees, the one who is the incarnate Supreme Soul, and the one, the adorable Lord of all, we salute, bowing our heads before Thee.